What did High Evolutionary do to the body of a little raccoon? Which of Rocket's anatomical details can we spot in Guardians of the Galaxy films? And which of those are the most interesting ones, being the least noticeable to viewers? This video answers these and other questions related to the big heart of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and support the video with your activity. This is very important for me. The story isn't about heart-wrenching pain, but it did begin with it. After all, pain can teach something no hero can truly realize themselves without: compassion. So when did our raccoon develop compassion? Right at the moment when everything was just beginning. Why did Rocket, still being a small beast in a cage, cover his fellow beings from impending danger in the form of his creator's hand? Is it just some random deviation in animal behavior in case of danger? Of course not. It's because our raccoon was born a Guardian of the Galaxy, not made one. But you already know that well enough. Today we're here to look closely at the peculiarities of Rocket's anatomy, his cybernetic and genetic modifications. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, James Gunn was quite generous with such things, showing them not only in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Actually, most of what we see in the latest installment was already there in the first part. All Volume 3 did was add some new details, mostly heart-wrenching ones that we'll discuss later. So what crucial nuances of Rocket's anatomy can we pick up in the first part of the Guardians? When Nova Corps apprehends the Guardians, we are briefly shown some dossiers in our characters. Among other things, we see Rocket's and Gamora's X-rays, and of course there's much to delve into here. But before we move on to analyzing the visualization of our raccoon skeleton, let's note this. In Nova Corps database, it stated that Rocket's skeleton is a result of cybernetic enhancements, and Rocket's brain is a result of genetic enhancements. Part 3 will make some adjustments to these statements, but again, we'll come back to that later. Here we see that almost the entirety of Rocket's skeleton is equipped with cybernetic implants, which in this case are shown in purple. Now it may seem that there are some in Rocket's brain as well, but no, it's just an artifact of the ones in his skeleton being highlighted. There's a good reason why a skeleton needed to be reinforced with implants to such an extent. You know, it's quite a task to redesign an originally quadrupedal skeleton for bipedalism. It requires altering the attachment of the head to the spine, making the geometry of the chest more compact, redesigning pelvic bones, spine, repositioning shoulder blades, changing the position of the heel bone. Rocket's movie version stands on a full foot, modifying clavicles, and much more. By the way, speaking of the clavicles, in the first film, Rocket's clavicles modifications are quite noticeable since they are relatively small in quadrupeds. Rocket's pelvic bones do not resemble either human or animal ones. They are particularly unique, as Rocket can move both bipedally and on all four limbs very effectively, which is unique in and of itself. And if, while watching the first film, we thought that this was the original vision of Rocket's creators, who aimed to design an agile and efficient biological and cybernetic organism, the third film will present a different perspective on this. By far the most dangerous of Rocket's skeletal enhancements highlighted by Nova Corps are the improvements to his phalanges and metacarpal bones. Nova Corps knows very well that if you give animals functionally working opposable thumbs, they will conquer the galaxy. To understand another interesting detail regarding Rocket's skeleton, we should pay attention to Gamora's skeleton too. Hers is also cybernetically enhanced, but with one significant difference. Some elements of her actual organic skeleton are completely missing. They've been replaced with 100% cybernetics. However, Rocket's entire organic skeleton remains intact. In this case, cybernetics cover the skeleton from above, thus forming an additional exoskeleton. And before we move on to part 3 of the Guardians, which shows us the truly dark origin of our raccoon, let's focus on another notable anatomical detail of his that we could see in part 1. This is, of course, the cyber implants on his back that Quill points out. They are integrated into his spine and around the spine. Of course, these implants are neural implants. Their purpose is to establish a connection between Rocket's enhanced brain and his new cybernetically enhanced body. Therefore, part of them is integrated into the central organ of the nervous system, the spinal cord. But why are these implants on the surface? Why not place them under Rocket's skin? Why are they located on the part of his back that's practically hairless? Actually, for the same reason that applies to some other modifications. As we know, engineers disassembled and reassembled Rocket countless times. Thus, they placed important neural implants on the surface for quick access, so that they wouldn't have to perform a complete surgery once again, considering that Rocket was already constantly undergoing those. Yes, this is something that Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3 reminded us of once again. And what's most horrifying, High Evolutionary Evolutionary, Rocket's creator loved to perform surgical experiments in the old-fashioned way, using conservative surgical tools and sometimes even conservative surgical approaches, of course compared to how advanced the setting of the universe is, such as brutal craniotomies. And all this to the horror of the little creature, constantly gaining intelligence and realizing what was happening to him. Yet up to a certain point, he really loved his father creator and believed in a joyful world where he would live with his friends. So Part 3 adds new details to Rocket's anatomical nuances, and here are the main ones. Rocket's skeleton is not only a result of cybernetic enhancements, but also genetic ones, which is clearly visible in these scenes, where we see the formation of Rocket's new, improved hands. The formation of a new skeleton suitable for bipedalism is influenced by genetic boosters, but cybernetics are still heavily used. Now we see that cybernetics on the skeleton serve as fixation devices. That is, these are kind of advanced osteosynthesis elements. They are intended to help a genetically enhanced skeleton adapt to its new anatomy, or in other words, to keep it intact. Observing Rocket in Part 3, we can identify temporary skeletal fixators, like here in case of collarbones, or here in case of right shin. The fixator on the right shin, a fully external fixator, is the element which is responsible for Rocket's improved bipedal movement. And here are permanent fixators, like here in case of collarbones and chest. However, the latter will become less noticeable over time. And not straying too far from the modifications of Rocket's chest, we can also pay attention to the external signs of improvement in the cardiac muscle. Internal improvements of the cardiac muscle can be seen here. More than that, among Rocket's various modifications, I want to draw your attention to the implants on his jaw, which will appear closer to the end of the origin story. After those are installed, Rocket will be able to speak much better. See, the way he had spoken previously had really annoyed his creator. The replacement of Rocket's skeletal fixators was literally the reason they had to disassemble and reassemble him again numerous times. As his skeleton rapidly grew, they needed to be constantly replaced. The problem is, Rocket's skeleton, as well as his body as a whole, was not ideal from the perspective of High Evolutionary. His goal was to create new biological species solely through genetic modifications. Cybernetically altered animal bodies were merely semi-products for him, models through which he sought the final prototype for a new species evolution. Such animals were expendable material in his research, and the changes in Rocket's skeleton turned out to be unfinished. That's right, unfinished. That's why his pelvic bones look so strange and even asymmetrical. The pelvic bones were exactly the part of Rocket's enhancements that remained unfinished, maybe the only one in fact. Ironically, it is the reason why Rocket can move quickly on 4 limbs with the agility characteristic of this kind, as well as walk on 2 legs like a bipedal human. Yes, it contradicts any sort of anatomical logic, but let's write it off as artistic liberty. Finally, what about Rocket's legendary brain, which always kept bothering High Evolutionary? Well, it is mainly a product of genetic enhancements, but these came along with a series of horrifying surgical manipulations. See, during brain surgeries, patients remain conscious so that medical staff can make sure that the brain functions are intact. Now, if the patient in question happens to be a small creature like this one, the only brain response that medical staff can track to ensure brain functionality is pain response, namely screeches of the small critter. Perhaps that's why other accompanying procedures were also performed without anesthesia. High Evolutionary never solved the mystery of Rocket's intelligence, but he failed to understand one simple thing that we discussed at the very beginning. That day, Rocket was chosen absolutely not by chance. He was born a guardian of the galaxy. That's the whole secret. But one way or another, Rocket's story is not a story of a scream piercing through emptiness. It's a story telling us that all otters, rabbits, walruses, and raccoons go to paradise. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel and support it with your activity. It means a lot to me.